So a warm welcome from our side, and welcome to the MERLIC 5.3 and Deep Learning Tool 2304 release webinars. So we are excited to share with you everything that we've been working on for the last 6 months. My name is Christian. I'm from product management, and I'm gonna start with about 15 minutes, a high-level overview of all the new features in the two products, and I want to explain to you why we develop those features and what their applications are. And then afterwards, it's going to be Anita's part.
Yeah, so my name is Anita. I'm an application engineer in the customer service team here at MVTec, and I will present you the hands-on part where we will see the new features in action.
Great, so thank you. So
we see you later.
So let's dive into the high-level overview. So first of all, a reminder, the release date of both products is today. And it's not a coincidence that both products release jointly, as you will see shortly. So I want to start with the newest features of the deep learning tool, and I picked 3 major features. And the first one is the object detection, training and evaluation, instance segmentation, and then the new export tab. Adding object detection, so training and evaluation for object detection, is just the next logical step on our roadmap to introduce all relevant deep learning technology into the deep learning tool. So this now includes the possibility to detect and locate objects and doing training without programming. So we want to make the deep learning tool a free tool that makes the access to deep learning easy for our customers. So it should be as easy as possible to import data, label data, train and evaluate, and then you will very quickly see whether you can solve your solution with our technologies. Very similar for instance segmentation. So here, in addition to being able to detect objects, you can also segment them, so you get the exact pixel region where the objects are located. And opposed to semantic segmentation, you can also differentiate between individual objects. So here again, you can do the training and the evaluation without the need for programming, and then you can do an export to our other products. And the last major feature I wanted to highlight is the new export tab. So in the past, we had this very familiar deep learning pipeline. So you import your images, you do the labeling, then you maybe do a review, you define your split, do the training, and then the evaluation. But then the process kind of stopped in our tool. So now, just to round out this process, we added the export tab. So here you can generate a training report. You can export it as a HTML or PDF file, and then you can also export the model, maybe optimize it for AI square interfaces, and then export the model to MERLIC or Herken. So now let's move to the MERLIC 5.3 new features. And here I want to start with, as you might have expected, the new Find Objects tool. With this tool, you're going to be able to find different instances of objects. It supports both axis aligned rectangles and not aligned rectangles. This is going to be an additional AI tool. So here again, our approach to add all the deep learning tool that's very powerful in Herken, also to MERLIC, and make it available for just a broader audience without the need for programming again. The Find Objects tool in MERLIC works in conjunction with the deep learning tool, so training and evaluation will be done outside of MERLIC. And also with MERLIC, we included a new example, and that's the find and count screws example that some of you might be familiar from Helken. How are you gonna access the new Find Objects tool? So in the tool library under Deep Learning AI, we just added a new tool at the bottom. And now I mentioned the workflow, but here just to visualize it again. So you will start the process doing image acquisition and pre-processing in MERLIC. Pre-processing might be alignment, so you can do axis aligned rectangles if that fits the application. And this should be, well, this should cut down on labeling time probably. Then you do set labeling in the deep learning tool, and then also the training and the evaluation, and then you use the new export tab to export the model for inference in MERLIC. So now to the second feature, and that's the support for the Mitsubishi Electric PLC with a MERLIC plugin. So we want to make MERLIC as easy to use as possible. And we found out that one aspect that's really required and is, well, to make the whole process easy to use is support with integration. And this is why we developed the communicator. The communicator already supports a lot of plugins. So like, as you can see on the screen, MQTT, OPC UA, but now we also added the first specific PLC plugin. And there we started with Mitsubishi Electric. We offer an open plugin interface, so even you can, well, fairly easily write your own communicator plugins. The third new feature I want to highlight is the training in the MERLIC front end. So many tools do require training in the front end, and a lot of time it has to be done by the machine user him or herself. So as you can see here, this is for this counting application. You only put an ROI over one object, and then you do the training in the front end, and this can be propagated over all the other images. So why is training in the front end so important? So in many cases, a CIP or a machine builder builds a machine with MERLIC, and then the end user is in charge of operating that machine. And for, as I said, many operators, you're going to have to do the training in the front end. So that is not only deep learning. How do I access this new feature? So you will just find in the front-end designer a new training widget that you can just import into your front end. And training can be done in many application areas, as you can see here, from barcode to alignment to counting applications, and also deep learning like anomaly detection. The fourth feature I want to highlight is the grouping. So we've had the issue that for some applications that are very complex, the tool workflow can become quite quite cluttered maybe. So now we add the option to mark several tools and then group them into this stack of tools basically. And this is just to make it much easier to work with big complex applications. So the way they present in the tool, so in the tool flow visualization, a group appears like the stack of tools, and in the tool board, it creates like a virtual tool, which has all the inputs and outputs of the sum of all tools inside the group. So you can still, from the outside, interface with this group as you would with a normal tool. So I think that's quite a neat solution. And the fifth new feature that I want to highlight is the concise startup dialog. So I think many MVTec users might be familiar with those startup dialogues, and now we also have it in MERLIC. It should give you very easy access to everything you need when you start MERLIC. So all the recent new MV apps, all the examples, documentation, news, and also the getting started guide. One thing that you can also do is personalize MV apps. So you can add an image, you can add a description. So why is that important? So let's say I'm a CIP, I'm an integrator, and I integrate MERLIC solutions for my customer. So I want to be able to manage my MV apps professionally. So I want to maybe add an image to make them recognizable. I want to add a description, maybe some version information, just for a round professional appearance of my MV apps. And now, very quickly, a few minor features that I want to highlight that might still be very important to many of you. So the first one is the new What's New topic in the documentation. So now it's very easy to access all the new features just straight from the documentation. You won't have to search around. The second is also concerning documentation. We added many more hyperlinks in the quick info. So now it's much easier from the tool directly to get to the documentation. So people are not going to get stuck. And don't have to search manually in the documentation. So there are many more direct hyperlinks now. We also added new parameters to the image source tool. So we added the source ID, acquisition time, and total acquisition time, and those are just values that can then, in the process, in the later process, be used, maybe also to optimize the runtime of the application. The next is new tools for region and ROI conversion. So the reason why this is important is some tools require ROIs as input, others require regions. And now it's very easy to convert one to the other and just have everything that you need for the further workflow. The next feature is our improvements to the evaluate expression tool. So one improvement is that you can just drag and drop the order of your calculations, and that's important. If, let's say, a second calculation requires the result from the first, so the order is important. And in the past, you had to remove the bottom and then do it again. So now you can just easily drag and drop those. And the last feature I want to highlight is the zooming during camera configuration. So you can zoom in, and that's especially important for just setting up the camera, configuring the parameters, well, just for sharpness and contrast. It's much easier if you can zoom in. So that concludes what I'm highlighting. It's not at all everything that we did include into those new versions. I think it's hundreds of tickets. And maybe Anita will also highlight a few new features that I missed. So let's welcome Anita on stage and see everything in action in the products.
So once again, hello everybody, and welcome to the hands-on part of this webinar, where I want to show you the most exciting new features in MERLIC 5.3 and Deep Learning Tool 2304. In order to do this, I will go ahead and close the presentation. And to show you a first new feature, I will open the MVTec Software Manager. And let's take a look what we have at MERLIC 5.3. Starting with this version, you can actually start other components other than the MERLIC Creator from the MVTec Software Manager. For example, the RTE setup, the front end, the RTE plus communicator and plus front end. In order to go further, let's go ahead and open the MERLIC Creator. This might take just a moment. Starting with this version, when we are opening the MERLIC Creator, as you saw from my colleague Christian, we are greeted by this very nice startup dialog from which you can navigate to different examples, see details about this example, navigate different help pages or tutorial videos, recent MV apps, or lastly, you can make a new MV app or you can open an MV app. Now, for the first part of this webinar, I want to show you how to use the new Find Object tool, which is based on the deep learning method object detection. In order to do this, I already prepared an MV app, so I will go ahead and open it. Now, let's take a look at our image sources. First of all, we have prepared a Fuses image source. I will take images from a folder, and in order to see them, I will use the image source tool. I will drag it into my tool flow. And for the first application, we will have to deal with fuses of different types in one image. Excuse me. So, our use case is that we want to see which type of fuses we have in each image and how many of them. In order to go further, let's see what we have new in this image source tool. We see here we can now return the used sources. We can also return the acquisition time and the total acquisition time. Now let's take a look to the pictures. We see that we do not need to do any important pre-processing, so we can go straight ahead and use the Find Object tool. You can find this under Pro-Processing, Deep Learning AI, and Find Objects. I'm dragging it into my tool flow. And the inputs are an image, of course. The next thing, a model file. So we need to import a trained model for object detection. In order to do this, you can of course use Helicon, but starting with this new release, you can use the deep learning tool in order to train and evaluate your object detection model. We will now go ahead and do this. So I will open the deep learning tool. I went back to the software manager. I have here the new version of deep learning tool, so I'm ready to launch it. Now we can go ahead and create a new project. And of course, I want to create an object detection project with axis aligned rectangles. I will name it Webinar Fuses, for example, and I will go ahead and create the project. Now, as you might know, for object detection, you need to label each object in each image. As this might be quite time consuming, I already prepared a data set, which I will import right now. Import data set, and we see here our images. We have a class 10 label, which specifies where are the red fuses. Because I want this to look better, I will change the color for this class to red. Then we have a class 15, which tells us where are the blue fuses, and lastly a class 20 for the yellow fuses. The same as before, I want to change the color of these fuses. This is not a new feature, but I like to have very explicit labels, so this is why I just did this step. Now let's go further and review our data set. Going quickly through it, we can say that we are quite happy with our labeling, and now we can go ahead and create a split. I will choose the default splitting, and as a next step, naturally, the training step. I will create the model and start the training. Before I do this, I actually want to make the training shorter by changing the number of epochs to 5, because we actually don't have so much time. So I just changed that, and I can go ahead and start the training now. This might take a few seconds, so we see the training started, it's going through the epochs, and we can see some results here. Now that the training has ended, we can go ahead and evaluate our model and hope that everything is okay. I started the evaluation, which is right now in progress, and we see we have a success rate of 100%. This means that our training was successful, and I am quite happy with this success rate, so I can go ahead and export the model. Now, this is a new feature in Deep Learning Tool 2304. This Export tab allows us to see an overview of the split, of the evaluation result, and it makes the export more visible. I can also optimize my model for AI squared interface, but for this webinar, it's enough to optimize it for the inference. In order to do this, I will click Export Model, choose a saving place. Let's name it with webinar at the beginning and export it. Now, this should be done any second now, and then we can go back to our MERLIC application. We see now this is done, so I will switch, and I can now go ahead and import my model. It's this file right here. I will open it, and any second now, the model will be imported into my MV app, and I will see the applied classes into my image. This happens right now, so I can see that I have for each object a class. Going to the images, we see that this is correct, and I can go to the next step. As I said, I want to count how many objects of each type I have in each image. So in order to do this, I will use the Evaluate Expression tool. I will drag it into my tool flow. Before I do this, of course, I need to take my classes tuple, link it to the Evaluate Expression tool, and now I can go further. Let's say that first of all, I want to check if I have any objects at all into my image. This means I will make a check expression which checks if there are objects into my classes tuple. Then I want to add a count variable, for example, a count for the class 10. For this, I will test if I have the class 10 string into my classes. So in classes, I will search for class 10. Then I can go ahead and add another expression for count 15. Which will be, excuse me, which will be similar to count 10, but we are searching for class 15. And lastly, I'm adding a class 20. Also similar to the one before, but for searching the string class 20. Now we see that we don't have any errors, so we can go ahead and check our front end. And we also prepared a front end for this. We only need to connect our image. I added this LED in order to see if I have any objects into my image. And last of all, I want to see how many objects I have of each class. So I will link the count 10 expression, the count 15 expression, and the count 20 expression. Now let's see how our front end works. We launch the front end, And we see here, we can now go ahead and go to the images one by one using this button here. Or I can actually, this is a new feature similar with Helken. I can go ahead and press F6, and this will go through the application step by step. Or I can press F5, and this would go continuously through the application without having to press the front-end buttons. To stop it, I also pressed F5, and our application seems to work just fine. So we have for class 10 4 objects, for class 15 we have also 4 objects, and for class 20 we have 3 objects. And this was the first part of this webinar where I showed you how to use the Find Object tool. In order to do a quick summary, you need to train an object detection model. You can of course do this in Helken, but it might be time consuming. So we actually recommend you to do it into the new deep learning tool version, so deep learning tool 2304, where you can now train and evaluate object detection as well as instance segmentation. Now let's go further to the second part of this webinar, where I want to show you how to use the new training in Frontend. In order to do this, I will go ahead and open another application. Now we see, for this application, we are dealing with DAO pieces. And our use case is that we are training a shape-based model in order to count how many DAO pieces are in each image of one type. For example, here we are also grabbing images from a file. I configured this image source here. Then we are zooming into the image in order to obtain a speed up. And lastly, we are doing a count with matching, where we trained, first of all, this object. For example, now we see that for this image, we have 4 pieces of round DAO, and we also defined an output of how many found models are in each image. Now there are 4 models found. This is a quite simple application, so I will go ahead and also show the front end, which is as well quite simple. We are simply going to the images and see if we find the round DAO. Now you might say, okay, but I want to do this with the long DAO, and I want to train my model without having to go back into the MV app. In MERLIC 5.3, you can actually do this by using the training widget. So in order to do this, I will go back, navigate to interaction, and here we see we have the training widget. We simply need to add it into our front end, resize it a bit so it looks better. And we need to connect it to our count tool. Now I added my widget, so let's go ahead and launch the front end one more time and see how this works. We see here the training is off. We still have the first model trained. So let's see how we can train this long DAO. In order to do this, just turn the widget on, transfer the image from pre-processing to training, click the image in training, and define your new shape. For example, using Easy Touch, I am defining this shape right here. So, like this. Now go back to the pre-processing image and see if this applied successfully to our images. We see here we find 4 pieces of this long DAO. Let's go to the images. Here we have no such piece. Here we have 2 of them, 4 of them, 5 of them. So it looks like our training for this type of DAO was successful. So I can go ahead and turn the training off and go to my application as I would do normally. For example, using F5, or F6. Now I want to go with this application a step further and prepare it for RTE. In order to do this, I will go ahead and close the front end. I want to save it before I do it. Yes. Close the designer and define my recipe. I already defined an output, so I am choosing to transfer to the outside how many of the found models I have in each image. So I can go ahead and save the recipe, choose a location, choose a name. I am happy with this, so I will save it. And now let's go ahead and open the runtime environment setup. First of all, I have to import my recipe into the recipe list. And of course, set it as default, because I want to open this recipe when I'm opening the MERLIC RTE. Then I'm going to start the MERLIC communicator. A command window for the MERLIC communicator just popped up. I see now I don't have any plugins loaded, so let's add some plugins into our communicator. First of all, as a new plugin, we have the MERLIC communicator plugin, and then we have the save results plugin. Let's add the MERLIC communicator plugin. This will allow you to communicate with the Mitsubishi PLC using the MERLIC communication protocol. Unfortunately, for this webinar, we don't have the resources in order to do that, but if you are using a Mitsubishi PLC, we actually encourage you to use this MERLIC communication plugin in order to communicate with your PLC. In order to use this, you need to set an IP address, a port. You can also set some result handling behavior. And what is very important is that you need to actually allocate memory for the data that you want to write to the PLC. We have, for example, let's say that we want to write this data to the PLC. We defined it in our recipe as an integer, and we want to write just this variable. So I will set integer to 1 because I only have one type of integer result. Additionally, you can also allocate memory for reading data from the PLC, and you can do a global label export. As we said, we cannot use this plugin at the moment, but I will save it and go ahead to the next plugin, which is Save Results. As the name says, this is quite simple. We actually are saving results from our application into an Excel file. Now, in order to do this, you need to set the formatting. For example, I prefer semicolon. You need to choose an output directory, and I already prepared a directory for this into our application. It's nothing there, just it's an empty folder. I'm selecting as a location for saving the results. And we can also choose the file name format. Let's save the changes. And for this plugin, let's actually start the plugin. We see here, the plugin is starting. We have a warning. This is not important at the moment. This is only telling us that we have not yet started the MERLIC RTE. Now, in order to control this, in order to save results from our application, we need to go into the MERLIC RTE and we need to control our application. And to control our application, we need the Action Sender plugin. I'm choosing to connect it to the default port, so I can go ahead and start the plugin. We see here the plugin is started and it's listening to our default port. Now, with our plugins configured, let's go ahead and start the MERLIC RTE. You can do this by going to the Image Sources tab, closing the creator, and now we see a new window comes, and from here we can start the MERLIC RTE. With this, a command window for the RTE will come up, and additionally, the front end will appear. So now I have quite a few windows here, so let's just put the communicator and the RTE command windows into the taskbar. And let's just look at the front end. And as we said, we want to use the Action Sender plugin. And for this, we need to open another command window. After this, we need to navigate to the installation folder of the Action Sender plugin. I have some quick access commands here. So we are navigating to the Action Sender installing folder, and then we want to send a start single job command. Now that I'm doing this, please observe the front end. We see that our application started in RTE. Now you can see we cannot actually control anything from the front end. This is actually normal in MERLIC RTE because right now our application waits for impulses from the outside. This means now for our Action Sender plugin. From here we can send start single job commands in order to go through the application. And you might say, okay, but what if I want to use my training widget when in RTE? For this, you have this front-end access mode widget. You can choose it from the designer. It's called Write Access. It's a widget, and you can add it into your front end. And now we have full control of our front end. We can turn the training on. We can do all of the steps that I showed before. And then we can turn the front-end access mode off. So now we can actually control it back from the outside. Now, in order to see the results that we saved, we have to go into a state which is not ready. This means we can go in hold. And our application stopped, and we can now actually see the results which are saved. Let's open the folder. We see here it was a file created, and when we open it, we are seeing our saved results. We only did 8 iterations of our application, so we only have 8 results, but this in your case might be a longer list of results.